Welcome to the Shut Your Mouth podcast. I'm Bree.
And I'm Amy. We are a health and wellness podcast with a heavy focus on sleep, breathing, and airway.
We'll be chatting with leading experts, sharing patient journeys, and getting to the root causes of issues that are plaguing our society. So shut your mouth
and listen up. All right. Welcome to the show, Brittny. Today we have Brittny Murphy with us, who is a registered dental hygienist with quite an incredible write-up of all the things you do. So I'm going to read through some of it and we will expand on that. But you, like I said, you're Brittny Murphy. You're a registered dental hygienist. You're a myofunctional therapist, educator, author, and key opinion leader on sleep and myofunctional therapy. You are a certified orofacial myologist. Hopefully I don't screw this up, but Butico breathing educator.
Perfect.
Yes, which I'm super interested in learning more. And one of my favorites, you are the co-director of the myofunctional therapy program at Toothpillow. You are the founder of CT Orofacial Myology and the co-founder of MyoAir. And you have a emphasis on, like I said, myofunctional therapy and practices aimed at improving oral and whole body wellness, which is perfect, right in line with everything we talk about. So super excited to get to know you further and hear more about your journey and your passion and kind of what led you here. So let's hear more. If there's anything I missed or anything you want to expand on, I'd love to hear from you.
No, that was perfect.
Just to kind of kick off the conversation, I would love to know what was the first thing that piqued your interest into the whole sleep airway world? What was that first thing that got you going?
So my story is a little bit different, I feel like, than most myofunctional therapists. I feel like typically we get into this field because somebody in our life has an airway issue that, obviously traditional medicine isn't really solving. We're kind of sick of hearing, try, this medication, or it's not a big deal, or they'll grow out of it, or whatever the case may be. Now, of course, once I took my first myofunctional therapy course, I then thought about all my friends, family who do have an airway issue. But I actually read about myofunctional therapy in an RDH magazine. And, as a dental hygienist, I am always looking for ways to improve my patients' overall health. And there were always I still can pinpoint these certain patients that I would see in my operatory and something didn't make sense, right? Let's say, this particular patient, he would constantly break zirconia, which are very, very hard crowns that were made for him. You should really not be breaking all of these. They're that hard. They're as hard as a diamond. And he would call constantly and we'd be like, oh, what is Mr. So-and-so chewing on this time that he's breaking them? And if I can literally still picture his mouth right now, and without a doubt, he had obstructive sleep apnea. His tongue looked massive. Now we know it's really that it's the underdevelopment of the jaws and that the tongue is just, the mouth is too small for the tongue. But scalloping on his tongue, a grade 4 myopia, all the airway signs. But I didn't know then what I know now. And the practice that I was practicing in wasn't an airway or sleep practice. So they didn't either. So we'd bring the patient in, we'd re-prep his crown. And, a month later, he'd break it again. And I'm something just doesn't make sense to me here. Or patients that would come in, say children, who, the kids would constantly be getting cavities and mom would be like, I just don't get it. We're brushing. We don't eat a lot of sugar. We're eating the types of foods that are supposed to clean the oral cavity. I don't know what else to do. And I'm okay, well, I would recommend my typical oral hygiene instructions that I learned as a hygienist, but never really understood that airway connection. I mean, I did know okay, maybe he's a mouth breather and he's exposed to more, bacteria, but not the deep dive journey that I know now of what mouth breathing can do to our bodies. So when I read about myofunctional therapy and they said how, it can treat all these different, sleep issues, TMD, headache, breathing issues, all holistically, I just was this sounds really cool and I need to learn more. So that's literally what got me into it. And then of course, as I'm sitting in the course, my nephew was just born 2 months ago and I'm well, he's tongue-tied. Okay, my dad definitely has obstructive sleep apnea. So then it resonated with me. But it was just my curiosity to learn more and really just help my patients.
That's awesome. And I know for me, because I worked in the dental office for 13 years. So I when you're talking about this patient, I'm I know who he is. I've seen a patient just like that in our office, or the kiddos where, one kid has cavities, the other doesn't. And it was the kiddo
Mhm.
that was riddled with cavities was the mouth breather. And
Mhm.
so once you started, doing myofunctional therapy and seeing those results, is there like a standout patient to you that you were just like, oh my gosh, this is life changing, these exercises?
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly, so I have two. So my very first myofunctional therapy patient, I remember finishing her program and like we did like our before and after photos and measurements and whatnot. And I was like, oh my God, like this really works. Like this is really cool. Her symptom list decreased, if not all of it disappeared. Like her main concerns when she came in to see me were she had tinnitus, so she had ringing in her ears. She could not sleep through the night without getting up multiple times. She had issues like swallowing, like what she would tell me were like thicker foods. Say she used pancakes as an example. And she had like this wicked asymmetry going on in her face where she thought like she didn't know if she had Bell's palsy, like she didn't know what was going on because it just kind of appeared. And so when we took her before and after pictures, like the symmetry we were able to, now looking, why I say I have two is I don't want to say she doesn't count, but I did not know even then what I know now. And she only saw me. And myofunctional therapy is one piece to the puzzle. And that is something that I think it's very important for us to educate our families on, is nothing is really a one-stop shop, right? It's not just getting expansion or a myofunctional guidance appliance. It's not just doing the myofunctional therapy. It's really the combination of everything where you're going to get the best results. But when I finished my course, there were no airway providers in Connecticut. I was just getting started. So all she did was myofunctional therapy, and we were still able to see incredible results. I've tried to contact her like multiple times since then because now I would refer her to like 4 other providers. I unfortunately have not been able to get in contact with her, but she still, just from the myofunctional therapy, she was sleeping better, wasn't getting up, the ringing in her ears stopped. Her breathing improved, her sleep improved. She was dreaming. Her swallowing issues disappeared. She was able to eat anything that she wanted to. She kind of like was nervous to go out to eat with friends because she always just felt like she was going to choke. So I would say she stands out just because she was my first patient. But more, I would say that the person that stands out the most to me is this 8-year-old boy who, it broke my heart. He wouldn't go to sleepovers because he was still wetting the bed. And, again, you're 8 years old. Like, of course, you want to go to all the sleepover parties and all this stuff. And he was really embarrassed, that this would happen. So between his myofunctional therapy, getting him, set up with an ENT, seeing if there were any airway obstructions, he ended up having a sleep study done. He ended up going through orthodontics. We were able to increase his airway dimension and really just change his overall life. So yes, he stopped wetting the bed, but even cooler, like he was a very shy kid and he didn't want to be involved in a lot of activities. And after, our whole treatment, mom had reached out to me. It was maybe like 6 months later. And like he joined clubs at school. He joined the soccer team. He was trying karate. And mom is like, this is like a brand new kid. Like we would literally have to force him to do anything. And he was asking to do these activities. So that was, really awesome to hear, not only obviously from a health perspective that you're changing somebody's life, but even just socially letting them like thrive as a human, is really cool to see throughout their airway journey.
I love that so much. And the fact that you brought up how sometimes it's not just one thing, like it's not just myofunctional therapy. And I know that was kind of how I found you initially, Brittany, is like we had done the expansion piece. And then I was just putting together like, okay, we forced the teeth apart. And I thought that was it. Like I thought that was the thing that was going to cure, the sleep issues and the breathing issues and the snoring and mouth breathing. But I didn't understand that we needed this muscle work to go along with it as well. And I think many people do the same thing that I do. And they assume, well, if I can only pick one, I'm going to do this route because that's going to move it. We're going to be able to see it. It's going to be the quickest route. And they really do all work well together. And it's not just one thing. It's like, it's this journey and you really have to address it all to get this foundational approach to set kiddos and adults, like for myself, I found about it as an adult, but to set them up for a lifetime of success versus like just doing one and then you have these little issues continue to pop up over time. So I love that you address that it's one of many
I
things
think
that
it's
can
so
help them.
important because we want to make sure, I want my patients to have all the information. I want them to be armed with all the education. And like I say to parents, I mean, of course, I'm a myofunctional therapist. Of course, I believe in myofunctional therapy. But the myofunctional therapy, it will only get you so far depending on what your structure is. So you might hear some people say like form follows function, meaning like your jaw is going to develop based on how your muscles are working, which I do believe, but I believe even more that it's a bi-directional relationship. And if you're trying to teach the tongue to live in the roof of the mouth, but there's just not adequate space up there, you could be the best myofunctional therapist in America, but you're not going to be able to 100% accomplish your goals. Like I'll always say to patients, we can optimize what we can based off of your current structure. But if we don't also visit the idea of whatever it is, a guidance appliance, expansion, orthodontics, whatever the case may be, we're only going to get so far. And I think that that's such an important piece to the puzzle because collaboration is like the biggest thing that we believe in. And so getting families to understand that is just so important because it could be overwhelming. I'm not a mom yet, but you guys are. And, you think like you're going to go see this one doctor and then this one doctor is now telling you have to go see 3 other doctors. Like it can be very overwhelming. But the more just education, awareness like this podcast you guys are doing is incredible because these types of like more conversational platforms, I think are extremely helpful to the general public. Instead of like Googling something, like hearing people have an actual conversation and breaking it down in layman's terms and like you guys sharing your personal stories with your families. It's just beautiful.
Yes. I do wish though that I could scream it from the rooftop because like I said, I think many people think that it's just an expander or guidance appliance and truly don't understand how important though addressing the muscle function is. So I love that is your passion. I love that you address the breathing, address the muscle structure, because truly that is so pivotal in making progress and making changes and very important. So
And one thing too is that I worry and I get nervous of for families is they get these treatment plans and they have to go here, they have to go there and do the whole thing. And so what happens is they freeze and do nothing. They're like, oh, that's too overwhelming. I'm not going to do anything. And so that kind of leads me into what I love, like for dental practices and with tooth pillow is sometimes we just kind of have to meet the patient where they are. And we want to avoid them doing nothing because something is, if we, we have like the dream world situation, right? Let's throw all the things at this child and make this beautiful, growth and all of the wonderful things. But at the end of the day, it's not always feasible, but we can do something. And even that something is going to get that child on a better trajectory. So that kind of, here at Tooth Pill, we offer exercises that the child can do on their own. And then we have other different programs that, you and Miss Laura have created. Do you mind elaborating on those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that because it is so important to make sure you don't overwhelm that patient for that reason. I've had a mom say like, this evaluation, there was so much information. I'm so appreciative of it. But my ear, like my listening literally had to stop because I was so overwhelmed. So like I teach a myofunctional therapy course and I always tell the students like exactly what you said. You have to meet them where they are. Yes, it'd be wonderful if every patient wanted to do all the things off the bat, but like that's really a unicorn patient. And we also have to be reasonable, like finances. Hello, money doesn't grow on trees. So we have to set priorities and we have to, again, meet them where they are. So yes, with our myofunctional therapy programs, to that point, some people, have issues with having exercises that are given to patients. I don't want to say not under a myofunctional therapist because we have trained myofunctional therapists at Tooth Pillow that are still guiding all of these things. We're getting video check-ins and things like that. But for that reason, okay, we got them in the door where they're understanding the importance of their child's health, their airway health, And once they go through or they start that myofunctional guidance appliance, just like Amy said happened with her, they will realize that that is not enough, that you need to address that muscle function. The more that they learn through that guidance appliance journey, the more that it's going to sink in like, okay, we did this, but now I'm seeing like it's not enough. We do need that extra individualized help, that individualized care in order for us to really, again, reach our goals. So of course, at Tooth Pillow, our overall goal is to have every patient in a custom myofunctional therapy program. Laura and myself are both huge believers. I mean, if you take one of my classes, one of the first things I say is myofunctional therapy is not a cookie cutter approach. Like it literally is not. I'm a big believer in that. So I don't particularly love when people say that about the Tooth Pillow, about our myofunctional therapy program, because it's just not true. But again, we're trying to educate families. We're trying to get them to see how these symptoms, are connected with things that they're seeing in their children. And then the more that we can educate them, even through these basic exercises, right? A family might start doing these exercises and say, okay, well, this one's really challenging. Like, as a parent, I don't know what to suggest to my kid to make it better, make it easier, or know if they're doing it correctly. So things like that can just open families' eyes to needing more of that individualized care. And the other thing, again, is we're not just like throwing these appliances at patients and saying like, see you later, like figure it out on your own. We're having these monthly check-ins and reevaluations, both on the structural side and the functional side, so that we can better direct families and say, I just think that your child needs more. We're seeing whatever we might be seeing in the patient functionally and recommending that custom program. And again, our overall goal is to get families to switch over to more of that individualized care.
And to kind of go along with that, so in the dental practice, like when I was in office, we would use this saying like a dental IQ. Like there's patients that come to you and let's say they have they need SRPs, they have, perio disease. There's those patients that have no clue why they need to spend $1,000 to get their gums healthy. They're like, no, I just want my free cleaning. Like, and they're so confused and baffled. And it takes, a skilled hygienist to help them correlate how this is affecting their heart, their health, and how this is not just a typical cleaning. We have to raise that dental IQ.
Right.
And so now we're in this space where we're helping families understand an airway IQ. And it is so new to so many families. And we get them on a spectrum. There's moms that come in, they've already gone down the rabbit hole. They already know they're seeing an incredible in-person myofunctional therapist. They just now need the second piece of the device, all these great things. And then we have moms that are like, whoa, I saw this 2-minute TikTok about this and I'm like curious, and they have no idea. So we kind of have to guide them in there and kind of help them make those dots.
Absolutely. And I think that Tooth Pillow does an incredible job at just that education component and that awareness, just bringing the awareness. Like, is your child doing, are they clenching and grinding their teeth? Do you notice their mouth is open? Like, and at the end of the day too, like, again, it's 2024, like social media is where a lot of people go to get their information. Now, yes, we want to make sure that we're putting out accurate information. But as long as we are, that's how you're going to reach more people these days. It's not like sending postcards. I don't even know what they used to do back then, but like sending postcards, like random postcards, like, hey, call our office if you're doing X, Y, and Z. Like, no, I'm sorry. Moms, dads, families, like they're on TikTok, they're on social media. And I mean, I've gotten so many messages from moms, like just thanking me for the content that I put out on my social media page. And I always say to everybody, like when they reach out to me, I'd love to provide virtual therapy for your family if they're not, in Connecticut, but I also would love to set you up with an in-person therapist if I know somebody in your area. And that's something, that we would like to do at Tooth Pillow as well, is if, virtual therapy, I believe definitely works. I've done virtual therapy since I started in 2016. And again, that was because there were not a lot of airway providers in Connecticut. So most of my patients I saw were out of the state. So for the most part, I think virtual therapy works fabulous. And like I was sharing with you, ladies, before we hopped on, we have families that live 3 miles from our office that still choose virtual therapy. Now, don't get me wrong. There are certain families that virtual therapy is not good for, or like little itty bitty ones can be very difficult virtually. And again, as a trained myofunctional therapist, whoever's evaluating the case, Laura, myself, one of our other therapists, we're always going to make a recommendation that's best for that family. So if we can get them in contact with a local myofunctional therapist, awesome. But we also have to keep in mind that like we're still a very small community. There's not a lot of us. So if we can do something to help these families, then absolutely, why not? If that's guiding, if we're talking about like say 3 or 4-year-olds, if that's guiding, mom, dad, or the caregiver on certain exercises that they can work on with the patient instead of us directly working one-on-one with the patient. Sometimes that's what myofunctional therapy ends up being with that age range. But again, access to care is one of the most important things that we have to increase. And I really believe that that's what Tooth Pillow is doing.
Yeah, so that plays into my own personal story a little bit. When my 8-year-old got his fixed expander in, I kind of had this inkling that he needed more just because his mouth was so small to begin with.
Mhm.
But the closest myofunctional therapist to us was 2 hours away. And I actually did try it. For a while I was like, let's do this. But I'm hauling my 8-year, at the time he was 7. And then I had a 4-year-old and I had a 1-year-old. So we're loading up, we're driving 2 hours. And then I'm trying to like keep my little ones entertained while we're in the office, but I'm trying to help my older one figure out how to do these exercises. And I'm like sweating and it's so chaotic. So just to have the option to do virtual takes the stress and the time constraints and a lot out of the picture for many people. And it allows, like you said, accessibility to people that just wouldn't do it otherwise because it's not possible.
Absolutely. And having those different programs that we do have at Tooth Pillow. So we have our basic plan, we have our semi-custom plan, and then we have our fully custom plan. That's not to say that a family getting started with either the basic or the semi-custom isn't going to convert to, the fully custom. But if we can get these families something to start assisting that guidance appliance, because doing myofunctional therapy along with a guidance appliance, you are going to see the maximum results compared to just doing the guidance appliance alone. So, I think that again, I think it's important that we're offering these different treatment options because we have to also keep in mind that finances are a thing and not every family is going to have the means to do all of the things right now. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and a lot of these families coming to us too have more than one kiddo. And there's a family coming to mind that I was helping. She had 5 kids, and she ended up doing 5 kids in Tooth Pillow, which is a lot. And then she's like, I can only do 3 for the myo. Please help me know which ones are which ones needed the most. And talking back and forth with her assigned provider to help figure out, okay, which kiddo is going to get this extra myo plan and things of that nature. And it's just, it's kind of like, I liken it to also doing YouTube video workouts or having a personal trainer. Like, obviously, if you can afford a personal trainer to make sure you're like getting those muscles correct and doing it perfectly, you're going to have great results. But if you're also going to benefit your life and have results from doing a YouTube video. And if you can't afford the personal trainer, you don't want to just do nothing, so having that ability.
Absolutely. And, again, I think that even what we're doing at Tooth Pillow is still different than that because we're still, even patients that are doing, say, like the basic plan, we're getting videos sent of these children doing these exercises. So it's not like there's no monitoring. We're not meeting with them weekly like we would like to be. But you're still getting the opinion of an expert therapist to help make any kind of corrections. But yeah, to your point, something is better than nothing in every instance. I don't think, yes, doing myofunctional therapy exercises with a trained myofunctional therapist is best because if you're doing the exercises wrong, you're not going to like gain benefit from it. But it's also, myofunctional therapy is completely holistic. Like, we're not going to cause any damage doing the exercises. We just might not gain as much benefit. You know what I mean? And then again, doing them and getting introduced to them makes it just sink in a little bit more how important the therapy is. And typically, again, once families establish their their appliance care, oftentimes they're going to want to convert to that fully custom program.
So this is maybe a little bit of a controversial question, but I love those. But I know within the myofunctional community, there is a bit of a split on guidance appliances or tooth pillow in general and myofunctional therapy. How did you decide, or how did you think outside of the box? How did you come to the conclusion that guidance appliances can help, tooth pillow can help? Was that a hard decision for you? And what has your experience been so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Choosing
I
that?
mean, the doctors that are at Tooth Pillow are incredible. And like Dr. Morale, let's just bring him up. He's been doing this for over 2 decades, right? With incredible results. These doctors are never going to recommend a treatment to a patient that is not enough for them. If they truly believe that, because there are cases where, look, the guide I think is always going to help. There's never a time where I wouldn't recommend a myofunctional guidance appliance, but there are times where that growth and development is so deficient that we need an actual palate expander in there. If that's the case, the doctors are going to recommend that. They're not just going to say I think of like that GIF with Oprah Winfrey, where like everybody gets one. Like that's not what this is, right? Like we're still specialized clinicians trying to provide the best possible care that we can to our families. I've seen incredible things happen with growth guidance appliances from all the different providers that I work with. The other thing that I love too is it's not, like a one size fits all type of thing. We use MyoBrace appliances, we use the Vivos appliances. Some are just better in certain cases, depending on what's going on with the patient. So I think that's really important as well. And again, if we're talking about like I don't know, let's say a 4-year-old, okay? That family might not be ready to put their child into an actual palate expander. So let's give them this growth appliance that is going to help, guide the adult dentition into a better position, and provide all of the passive myofunctional therapy while they're wearing it as well. But again, important, you're still doing your myofunctional exercises because the guide does not provide enough myofunctional therapy. I do want to put that out there. But why wouldn't we get these families started as soon as we can? So it was definitely like a no-brainer for me. I see patients globally, right? So there aren't airway providers globally. So again, the idea behind Tooth Pillow and being able to see, we just saw, I'm sorry, a new patient this morning from California who I'm not familiar with any airway providers in that area. Well, great. Now I'm able to refer them into the Tooth Pillow system so that they can meet with a provider, that is in somewhat closer to their area and get them the care that they need. So, there's always going to be controversy. There's always going to be people that think their way is the best. And I'm more open to it's whatever's best for the patient. And there's so many different tools that we can use to assist. So as long as we're making the recommendation that's best for that patient at that age, I don't see anything wrong with it.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And I was going to mention too, with I know you're on the faculty at Airway Health Solutions, and you guys really are agnostic in appliances. Like you stay really open-minded. It's not necessary. It's what tool is best for that provider, that family, and just doing what you can to support them. And also I wanted to mention when you talk about your patient in California, I love with Tooth Pillow just being a stepping stone, because we have lots of patients that don't get approved, or they reach out and we don't have a provider in say Canada yet. But I'm now able, because of this huge network we've created, I can find them somebody now. I have resources to get them somebody so they're not just sitting and waiting and losing this precious growth and time that we have.
Right.
And so it's really a like no risk, like just kind of, it's like this nice little stepping stone. Like maybe we're your answer, maybe we're not, but one thing I can guarantee is we're going to help you, and we're going to provide you something and resources, because there's just, we've said this many times already, but there's just not enough providers yet, and we need to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that ties into a little bit to what Brittany had said about being open-minded. I feel like one of the reasons I personally was drawn to Tooth Pillow is because they're open-minded. So, like you had said with Myo Brace, sometimes they'll recommend that or a tooth pillow or another appliance. And then we'll have patients reach out or parents reach out and their child is 2 and they'll be asking, what can I do for that? And we don't have our baby program yet. So it's like, try out a Myo Munchie or try out this. It's not like tooth pillow only. I can't help you otherwise. It's a team full of open-minded people that will take a look at your child's specific case and figure out what's best for you, even if that's referring you to somebody that's not in tooth pillow. And I just think that's incredible because it is so rare to find a company full of people that are just there to assist you and help you on your journey and help you find the right fit for you.
100%.
Yes. So I would love to know about your breathing. Does that tie into, do you offer that in myofunctional therapy, the Butico?
Butico.
Yeah, so does that tie into your myofunctional therapy? Do you utilize that at all, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So, there's so many different breathing modalities out there. And usually what I say to myofunctional therapists is find what suits you best. Through my research, that was Butico. The reason I love Butico is it focuses on the inhale and the exhale through the nose, which a lot of other breathing modalities are in through the nose, out through the mouth. And it really helped me understand the biomechanics and the biochemistry of breathing, which for me as a clinician helps me treat my patients better. And then also, there's families that want to know that stuff. They want to nerd out with me and I love it. So I totally get into that with them. But all of our myofunctional therapy programs include breathing reeducation because it is so, so, so important. It's similar to if you have a tongue tie released, okay, great. You have a tongue that has this range of motion, but it has no idea what to do. So if we're talking about breathing and we're talking about somebody that is a chronic mouth breather, those dominant muscles are up here, our upper chest. Sometimes there's shoulder breathing, or you're going to see more heavy chest breathing. We're not really taking those deep breaths. We're not really using our diaphragm. And, especially with anybody, but especially a child, to get them to understand what using those belly muscles actually is, it takes a little bit. So we can't just say, okay, you gained some space, through your guidance appliance. We are doing nasal hygiene. Maybe they had their tonsils and adenoids removed if they needed to. So they have this clear passageway. It doesn't mean that they know how to use it. And that's where that breathing reeducation comes in, is really getting them to understand what muscles should dominantly be in use through nasal breathing, and really strengthening them, So it's really that whole body connection. Not only are we going to work on obviously getting the tongue up in the roof of the mouth and the lips closed to nasal breathe. Yes, having the tongue up in the roof of the mouth is going to help you be a better nasal breather, but you have to know how to activate your diaphragm. And sometimes that even goes a step further, where we're working with a physical therapist or an occupational therapist to help with pelvic floor stability too. That really plays a big role in breathing. But it's really important. You can clear an obstruction, you can make things wider, but that doesn't mean people are going to know how to breathe. You have to retrain them.
Yeah. And I want to add to this because I just had this situation with a patient. I was on the phone with the mom, and she was telling us, because one of our first exercises is just a simple breathe in, breathe out type exercise. And I'll tell on myself here. I skip that one, and I'll be like, I just that's so elementary. What? And I just didn't see any importance in that first exercise for myself and my kids. But after talking to this mom, I was my eyes were so open because she was telling me how her daughter was struggling so much with that first exercise. And she just could not get this concept of breathing in her nose and out her mouth. And I was just blown away that we take it for granted, right? Breathing seems like this nature's just, everyone's born knowing how to breathe, but that's not the case. And correcting those improper habits can be incredibly difficult. And I've heard some Buteyko breathing courses, and I've done some workshops, and at the end of like the hour-long lecture, I'm sore.
Yeah.
What the heck? And I'm like, I'm relaxed and I'm sore because,
Mhm.
you just don't realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this so wrong.
Mhm.
And it's even going back to the dental office, which I just find myself always going back there.
Mhm.
But like brushing your teeth, you feel like it's just this easy thing that everyone should know to do. But there's so many people who are not brushing their teeth correctly.
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
have to teach those things. And so going with everything you're learning and, going back to those most basic elementary foundational steps and getting those
Right.
correct and then building upon those.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I can get a little nerdy on here with the whole breathing thing, but a lot of people focus so much, like when we think about breath, we think like we focus on oxygen, which yes, of course we need oxygen. But when we're really talking about changing breathing patterns, like if you go to see like a breathing specialist or, a really expanded airway dentist, and they measure your breathing, they're not going to measure with a pulse ox. They're going to measure with a capometer, which measures your levels of carbon dioxide in your body. It's actually carbon dioxide that triggers our respiratory drive. So when we talk about breathing in and out through our mouth, when we breathe out through our mouth is a lot bigger than our nostrils are. So when we exhale through our mouth, we let out too much carbon dioxide. And so what happens is it makes it very uncomfortable in the beginning, to switch somebody from a mouth breather to a nasal breather. I'll ask them after we do a breathing exercise, like, how do you feel? And they'll say to me, well, I don't feel like I'm getting in enough air. Something doesn't feel right. And the thing is we have to build their tolerance to having carbon dioxide in their blood in order to make it comfortable for them to breathe through their nose. So with Buteyko, a lot of our exercises actually include breath holds, where you literally hold your breath for certain exercises. And the idea, again, with that is to build up that tolerance to carbon dioxide so it is easier for you to slow down your breaths in and out through your nose. So I like to educate patients on that a lot. The way I kind of explain it is like, if you think like, I don't know if people will be able to see me. Is this like a video podcast too?
Yes.
I think it's a little both. So,
Okay.
so if the one's watching, we'll see you.
If you put your two fists together. One fist is oxygen, one fist is our blood. In order for oxygen to be released from the hemoglobin and go where it needs to go in our bodies, you need carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is what allows for that release of oxygen. And a lot of people, they don't think about that, because when we think about carbon dioxide, like even if think about in grade school, like carbon dioxide is a waste molecule, right? Yes, too much carbon dioxide in your body is not good, but we do need certain levels in our body in order to properly trigger our respiratory drive.
Yeah, that's so interesting you brought this up, because I kind of briefly shared this with Dr. Moralia on our first episode. Because my mom passed away at 59. She had sleep apnea, and and severe, like she had the soft tissue surgeries. I mean, she went through it. And so when she was having these episodes, so everything just kind of compounded, and she would actually walk around, and if you put a pulse ox on her, she could be talking to you, having a full conversation, and it would say 85. Like if you were at the hospital, you'd be dead. You couldn't function. But her body got so used to functioning at such a low level of oxygen, she could just every time she had to go to the doctor or something, they would freak out. Like, how are you alive? Like, how is this happening? And then actually what was happening when she would wake up in the morning after all this night of not breathing well, she would act a little we would be like, what is wrong with mom? She's saying sentences that don't make sense. And then they would get her to the hospital, and she actually had too much carbon dioxide in her blood. Like, again, the doctors are like, she should be dead right now. And there's no way a human can function on this level. But her body, because she's had it OSA her whole life, always struggled. Her body just had this incredible tolerance to it. I mean, unfortunately, it did take her life eventually, but the fact that she got to 59, is crazy. And talking about not knowing what you know now, it just makes me so sad that I can't call her and be like, oh my gosh, I know now. I know what's going on. And, it all makes so much sense now. but it's just crazy. Our bodies are crazy. Like the things
So
that they can do
crazy.
and tolerate. I'm like,
That is, yeah. And your body, I mean, she just grew accustomed to that. But yeah, I mean, too much CO2 is definitely poisonous to the body. But that's crazy. So 85 at a baseline, that is pretty wild.
yeah. And like we would just have them around the house and like we would just put them on her. And then like anytime she would go to the hospital, she would actually, for just normal things like unrelated to that, she would beg us not to take her to the emergency room because she knows she's going to get admitted. Because they won't let you leave when that's your oxygen.
Right.
So any hospital visit or doctor's visit was automatic like stay. And so because she knew that, she'd be like, I don't want to go to the doctor. Like, please don't take me. They're going to admit me. And she just got used to it. And it's just crazy how long she was able to function that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that you found this airway field then for a reason, right? There was a purpose so you could help other people, you know, like your mom.
Yeah, there's so many signs and symptoms I saw in my mom that like now, you know, connecting those dots. And we do that. And you do this with your patients every day. You're like, there's this tree that you're connecting them to all these other things that you're suffering from. We can root it all the way back down to these underdeveloped jaws, these low muscle tone, you know, muscle dysfunctions. And so I just, I love, because we have, and we can kind of maybe mention a little bit about adults because we always ask about adults. But when I hear a stubborn 45-year-old man, like, I ain't wearing my CPAP, I'm like, okay, well, you have 4 years left.
Yeah.
You know, because I did the math wrong on that, but you know, however many years left, like I show them, like, you can look at my mom's photos when she was diagnosed versus the time when it took her, like the just toll it took on her.
Decline.
Yeah. So I'm just like, take it seriously. There's so many people. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people that go, oh yeah, I have it, but I don't ever wear my sleep out. Like they just,
oh my God, it's crazy. Or my other favorite is, well, it's not that bad. Like I just have mild or I just have moderate. And like, that's like me saying I'm only mildly pregnant. Like, no, I'm pregnant or I'm not pregnant. You have sleep apnea or you don't have sleep apnea. And, you know, I think a lot of us in the airway field kind of wish they didn't come up with those, you know, those, what am I trying to say? Parameters for mild, moderate, and severe for sleep apnea. And one of the ways that I found is very useful, and I heard this through, it was some kind of sleep test company, but they gave me this equation to use with patients. And to remember the equation, you just have to remember MAHI. And what you do is you take minutes in an hour, so 60 minutes obviously, or in an hour. Let's say that somebody's AHI was a 30 for sake of math for my brain. So it'd be minutes divided by their AHI. So 60 divided by 30 obviously equals 2. So that means every 2 minutes, that patient is stopping to breathe for 10 seconds or more all night long. So then what you would have the patient do is you would literally set a timer, put it to 2 minutes. It gets to 2 minutes. You're like, okay, hold your breath for 10 seconds. And then do it again, another 2 minutes. Hold your breath for 10 seconds. Like this is literally what your body is doing all night long. How do you think that's going to impact? Literally every single organ is going to be impacted by that. And I thought that that was really powerful for those patients that think, I don't have to do anything, mild to moderate, it's not that bad. Like, okay, but if I told you that you stop breathing for 10 seconds or more every 2 minutes, like that's wild. Nobody's going to want to not treat that.
I don't even like, so I have 2 boys, 6 and 8. And, you know, it's real fun to see who can hold their breath longer, the longest in the pool and stuff. I don't know why, but now knowing what I know, I was like, no, we're not playing that game. Like, you are going to breathe and not hold your breath because they get competitive. And then like, there's moments I'm like, come up.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure like as a mom too, you're like, okay, well, what's going on here? But I will say that is one of our Buteyko exercises.
Oh, really? So it's a good thing.
Yes, if they need it, right? Like if they're mouth breathers, to help convert them and make nasal breathing more comfortably for them. Like one of the exercises that we do is literally you breathe in through your nose, you breathe out through your nose, you hold your breath, and you rock your head up and down. And you want to do that for as long as you can. And we call it like a maximum pause. Now you don't want to hold it for too long. Like you shouldn't like continue breathing and like have to like gasp for air. That's a little bit too long, but you do want to continue seeing that number go up. There's also an exercise we do with little kids. Your sons would probably love this exercise. They breathe in through their nose, breathe out through their nose, block their nose again, hold their breath, but they walk. And you want to count to see how many steps they can take until they have to breathe again. And you want to work up to like somewhere between 50 to 70 paces.
Wow.
I mean, it's dependent on the age range.
Yeah.
There's like a different breakdown for it, but breath holds is one of our exercises. I mean, you don't want to do it like for an hour straight, but
Yeah. No, well, that's really good information. I did not know that. And I'm just really thankful for this gem because, you know, sometimes I'm on calls with moms trying to help their child get accustomed to wearing the guide. And I always think, so sometimes it's funny, like I'm saying stuff, but I didn't really know the science. I just knew this trick works, but I don't know the science behind it. You know, but I always tell moms, like, you know, when you're running and you no longer can breathe through your nose and you start breathing through your mouth and you try to go back and it feels like the hardest thing in the world. Like these kiddos, when they first put this in, it is not easy. It's going to rock their world. Like, you know, to like not have their, you know, you're switching up their routine. So this is just like such a great little thing to practice with them to like kind of build up tolerance to a device. Just also kind of looping back together the importance of you need it all, right? You need the exercises, you need the breathing, you need the nasal hygiene, you need all the things to make it work.
Totally. Absolutely.
I feel like the whole CPAP machine was, you know, how you kind of come to a conclusion or you find your journey with like these little sprinklings throughout your life. And so I was seeing these issues in my kids and understanding that something was up with their sleep and breathing. And now I know airway, but I was also at the same time, like I was experiencing things myself, but I was seeing things with my parents. So both my parents got put on CPAP machines. And I remember thinking like, this can't be the only answer, like to be hooked up to this machine and wearing this mask and getting the air. I don't even fully know how it works, but getting the air put in, I was like, there has to be, being more holistic minded, there has to be another way to address this, either at the age that I'm at, which yes, that's a possibility, or younger at the age that my kiddos are at. So I think people listening to this, having the full picture of, you know, this is what symptoms might look like in a child, and this is what it might look like when you're middle age. And okay, now you're talking, you're 50, 60, 70 years old, and you're on the CPAP machine because it's progressed your whole life, but you can address it way back in the beginning or address it where you're at now. Absolutely. So I love that we're able to, or now that we have the understanding to paint this picture for people and help them put the pieces together. Even like what you were saying with I don't remember how old he was, but the guy that was having issues with his swallow. I know that is something that I've heard in children, but in adults as well. And if you go into your typical Western med doctor, it's like, well, you know, you maybe have reflux, so let's put you on this. And you maybe do have reflux, but like, what is the root cause of that reflux? Or what is the root cause of you feeling like your tongue is too big inside your mouth? And having the answers, myofunctional therapy, getting, you know, your airway addressed, taking a look at this whole big picture is so foundational to everything and interesting and life-changing. So
definitely.
I appreciate you and appreciate all the things you're doing.
I appreciate you guys and all the things you're doing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I did have one other question. So we were talking about the swallowing in this adult patient. What does that look like, or what symptoms can an improper swallow cause in a child? And how would you go about trying to help that child swallow better, more functional? Because that's another thing along the lines of breathing. It's like, you just swallow, you don't think about it, but you can be swallowing totally wrong.
Right. Compensations. We just pick up and, you know, how I explain to kids is like, you're basically asking help from other surrounding muscles to perform an action that those muscles should be totally relaxed in. So like one of the easier ways to see if there's an improper swallow pattern, like as a parent, is literally just watching your child. Like the facial area here should be pretty frozen. Like there should be little to no engagement. So if you're seeing a lot of like facial grimacing, like head nods, you know, tightening up of those muscles, anything like that, that's telling you that those muscles they're calling upon and they shouldn't be. So like if I was to swallow right now, The only way you should be able to tell that I'm swallowing is if you watched my throat. There would be no activity going on in these perioral muscles. If you're getting a evaluation by like a dentist or a myofunctional therapist, they might actually have their hands or in the patient's mouth like this and feeling like those extraneous pressures going on to see, again, if there's other muscles that are being called upon. And what was your other question? So what can parents?
Oh, okay. So in an adult, the adult could say like, oh, I'm struggling to swallow. It feels like my tongue is too big for my mouth. But in a child, kind of what I've heard is, it can look more like picky eating or
choking,
choking, a really intense gag reflex or reflex, reflux, yes, can be one, but just all these different things that can be caused by an improper swallow. And this
and
adult
digestion, your
tell
digestion,
you, like, this is how it feels in my mouth, but a child would be like, oh, I don't like that food, I don't like the texture, or they're gagging. What other symptoms am I missing that could be, caused by an improper swallow for someone listening and being like, oh, my child is a picky eater, I didn't know it could be related to this potentially.
Yeah, I think really wanting like an affinity to softer foods is probably one, although that can be linked with tongue tie, but a patient with a tongue tie typically will have like dysfunctional swallowing patterns. It kind of, all goes together there. Digestion, like having poor digestion. We see a lot of kiddos with, constipation. They struggle, every day. And that's another big one. Like digestion starts in your mouth. So it's not even just the swallowing process. It's like the whole process of eating, from like chewing. Like chewing is really where that digestion is going to start and breaking down those foods. But if you're not swallowing correctly, and say you're like, swallowing air, we call it aerophagia, that can cause like a lot of like burping, that can cause a lot of bloating, in the stomach, just like feeling pretty yucky after you eat every time. We shouldn't, especially if we're having a pretty decent diet, there's no reason that we should be having these upset stomachs. So as a myofunctional therapist, we talk about how their digestion is, if they're going regularly, what types of food do they eat? And watch also how they're eating it, like that whole, from the second they place the food in their mouth, even how they placing the food in their mouth, because that can be a sign of oral dysfunction. And really, anytime that there is oral dysfunction and you have that lower tongue posture, typically there's going to be an impacted swallowing pattern, because if you rest with your tongue in the bottom of your mouth, and then you go to swallow, you're not just going to automatically now bring your tongue up. Like, it doesn't work that way. Your tongue learned to live in the bottom of your mouth. You're not just going to do the right thing when you swallow. So, sometimes it's harder for parents to kind of unpack that that swallowing dysfunction, but they might just see those other symptoms going on. And then when they have the evaluation with us, and we can kind of point out more things to them. But I mean, I think digestion is one of the biggest things that is impacted when patients have, poor chewing and swallowing skills.
Yeah. And I've seen patients too that moms say they don't like pizza. And then I look at them, they have this huge open bite. And I'm like, yeah, they don't like pizza. They can't bite it. Or you'll see them use like they'll bite like that. And it's like, yeah, I can probably guess why they don't like pizza.
Yeah. It's crazy. Even like, tongue tie patients, if you watch the way some of these kids eat, like they literally shovel the food in their mouth to get it to their back teeth, because when we take the bite of food, our tongue brings up the food to our molars. Well, if your tongue is so severely tied that you don't have that mobility, we still want to eat. So these kids are literally just shoveling food in their mouth.
Me and my husband had our tongue ties released at I don't even think it's been a year yet. And so for him, he would have this neck pain. And I was telling him all the things that this might help with, but I just didn't think of the neck pain. And the moment he got his tongue released, he kept doing this. And he also wasn't a believer. He's just doing it because I'm making him. And then to this day, he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll do my exercise, whatever. And still, every so many days, he'll be like, I can't get over, I have no neck pain. And he'll sleep. He used to not be able to sleep on his stomach, to turn his head. He could only do it one way. The other way he couldn't. And he can both ways now. His neck is free. And then when he would swallow, he would have those accessory muscles really help him to swallow. And he's just now he's a believer. And we were like at
I
dinner,
love
of course, tongues and teeth come up when
Yep.
I'm around. And so someone was saying, "Oh, my husband said he had a tongue tie," and my husband's like, "Get it done. Like, you need this
That's
done.
so
It's the
funny.
best
I
thing."
love it.
So he's like a firm believer.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that we see. Like if you were to look up, you could probably easily find a Google image of it. If you were to type in deep frontline fascia, there'll be an image where it's literally connected from the tip of the tongue all the way down to the toes in one connective piece. So when you think about that and you think about that restriction starting all the way higher up in the chain, I mean, the way that it impacts the body from head to toe is incredible. And I love being able to collaborate with manual therapists and body workers because, really, I mean, this is more my area, like below the eyes, above the shoulders, but I know that the rest of the body is important. So for them to kind of, tell me exactly what it is that they're feeling and then the changes that they feel after the release. I had one woman call me. She was 64 years old, wanted to get her tongue tie released. I loved it. She called me crying from the parking lot after her tongue tie was done. And I knew she just had it done. So when I heard her crying, I was like, oh, dear Lord, like what happened? And she's like, Brittny, she's like, I just went to reverse out of my parking spot. And for the first time, I was able to actually turn my head to reverse instead of just looking in my rearview mirror. She was like astonished at the amount of mobility that she gained in her neck. It was incredible.
Yeah, that's how I got my nephew. I'm gonna send you pictures of all of our tongues, my son, my nephew, everybody. But he was tipped to in, like he was like the most severe that you can. He made it all the way to I think he was 10, like when we got this release, and he was not obviously wanting the idea of it happening. And I told my sister-in-law, I was like, tell him it's gonna make him better at baseball because he's gonna be able to like swing that better. And she did text me that he has reported that he does feel an improvement in his swing. And I'm like, see?
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. And that's why you have to find like the other thing I always say to my students is like, we know all of these things as airway providers, but at the end of the day, it's like, what's the most important thing to the patient? What is their chief complaint? Because they want to see that being improved the most, Yes, we can educate them on all the other things that are going on, but typically like people are going to treat things that are important to them. Not what's important to you, what's important to them. So
like,
for him, it was baseball.
Yeah. Or like women, like when you were talking about using all these muscles, I thought, oh, it's probably going to increase your chance of wrinkles. Like, or like, and like, so I'm getting like kind of vain, like, oh, I need to make sure I'm not like overly using.
Hey, whatever makes them do their exercises, I'm good with.
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on an hour. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but Amy, any last minute questions or?
I did, since we were talking about tongue ties, I was curious if you have like step 1, step 2, step 3, things that you should do before, during, and after tongue tie. I know I feel like I'm the person that like learns by doing things the wrong way. So I have a very narrow palate. And 7 years ago, I got my tongue tie released, but there was no room at all for my tongue in the roof of my mouth. So a lot of my symptoms did stay. And I also didn't like, myofunctional wasn't really a big thing at the time. Like maybe it was, and I just didn't quite know about it. But I had a release, didn't do myofunctional therapy, didn't have space in the roof of my mouth. So we'll do it again someday. But like if someone's listening and they're like, oh, I think I have a tongue tie, what would be the optimal way to go about the steps? Should you do myo first and then the release? What's the protocol here?
If expansion is going to be mixed into it, I do think that it is better to be expanded first. Sometimes some providers want to like 2-step releases so that we can get the tongue a little bit more mobile to assist in that expansion process. But to your point, like for you, you had your tongue released with your narrow palate. So your tongue healed to that structure. And then you went through expansion and changed it. And now you need a revision. Yep. As far as the myofunctional therapy, it is like, you'd have to do the myofunctional therapy before. Like I would say like it is literally non-negotiable. And really great tongue tie release providers, one of the ways you can know if they're a good tongue tie release provider is they literally won't do the release unless they get the green light from the myofunctional therapist that patient's ready. And, it makes sense. Like you wouldn't go through any other kind of procedure without getting some form of physical therapy. And I guess that's kind of relates it more to the post-operative. So people sometimes understand that like, okay, I get my tongue released. I need to do some exercises after. The pre-op is where people are like, is it really necessary? But it is, because if you, like, let's say, I forget, you have a sleep disordered breathing as well, Amy?
I do, yes.
So if you say you have, especially like a sleep apnea patient, you want to be very careful with this. You release that tongue and you give it all this new range of motion, and it has no idea that it's supposed to rest in the roof of the mouth. It's going to fall and obstruct that airway even more, to the point where you can make their sleep apnea worse. So the idea with the exercises preoperatively is not only are we already starting that neuromuscular reeducation to get those muscles functioning better, but two, it also helps the release provider get a much fuller release. If you were to bring a release provider on this call and you ask them the difference that they saw in their releases, doing releases without myofunctional therapy, and then doing releases with myofunctional therapy, it's like night and day. They're able to get a much, much fuller release. And a lot of that goes back, again, talking about like that fascia, and all those compensations and all of that patients tend to carry. We're working on reducing some of that fascial restriction pre-op. We're working on reducing those compensations pre-op. So it just sets the patient up for much better success if they did that pre-op therapy. So I'm sorry that you didn't do it before.
No, that's
But your
okay.
next tongue-tie release is going to be awesome.
I truly feel too like that's part of my story. Like maybe I did some things in the improper order, or I made the, not the most ideal choice, but now I'm in this position where other people can learn from it. And I absolutely love that. So yeah, I assume it would be the same for kiddos, that you'd say, make sure there's room for the tongue, ideally, myo, release, myo.
Yep. Always myo before and after.
Yeah. Do you have recommendations on like a listener who maybe has a baby with a tongue tie? I know that they can't do like myofunctional therapy, but what would your recommendation be for pre and post-op in a little baby?
Yeah, I would say definitely working with an IBCLC. So that's going to be an internationally board certified lactation consultant, whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding. And I think one of the most important things too for moms to know is a lot of moms feel this guilt, like they have all these goals of wanting to breastfeed, and then the baby's born and it's just not working out. And they think like it's their fault. And I'm not saying it's the baby's fault that the baby's tongue-tied, but a lot of moms, they're like, well, I couldn't, like my supply, I literally had no supply. Well, when we think about supply and demand, if that baby's not latching efficiently, that supply is going to go down. It only makes sense. Right. So definitely an IBCLC, whether you plan to bottle feed or breastfeed. One that preferably is well-versed in tongue ties, because not all are. Some will say it's not a big deal, or there's no such thing as like a posterior tongue tie or a mid-tongue restriction. And then I truly believe body work is very important for infants pre and post-op. I think body work is important for all ages, pre and post-op, but definitely for babies. So that would be my recommendation. Definitely an IBCLC and or a body worker.
Awesome. I feel like we in our Facebook group for Tooth Pillow, we have a handful of body workers in there, and I always see them like when moms are asking advice on things, they're like, make sure you see this. And so I think they're going to be like, yeah, yes, that's what you're cheering that you said that.
Yeah. And especially that, that post work, because again, you're getting this tension released, but there's already so many tension patterns created through the rest of the body that the body really isn't going to just unravel on its own. It's going to need a little bit of assistance. And that's where that body worker is going to come in. And I'm not saying you have to see them forever, but seeing them for a few sessions where they can even give you simple exercises like putting a baby on a medicine ball. I'm not going to say too much because that's not my realm. So I don't want people to be following my advice or anything. But, there's certain things that they can help you with that are going to help strengthen the muscles that aren't where they should be due to that tongue tie. So like a lot of tongue tied babies don't like tummy time. They might not automatically just love tummy time after their tongue tie release. They also might not automatically latch on, the nipple immediately after. Sometimes they need that assistance. And that's where seeing the IBCLC or the body worker is going to be really important.
That's
Awesome. All of this info has been super helpful for me personally, and I know it'll be super helpful for all of our listeners as well. So thank you so much for being here, Brittny.
Thank you for having me, guys.